Hi everybody, this is Tana from Proverbial Homemaker, and today we are going to be doing a review of God's Design for Life, the regular version and the beginner's version from Master Books. So I kind of decided to do this at the last minute, and so I'm hoping, normally I get a chance to let you guys sign up to get reminders. I sent out reminders to everybody who had signed up before, but it was just kind of a last minute decision. We are actually in vacation mode right now and kind of moving in that direction anyway. We're getting ready to go on vacation on Saturday, so I'm just trying to wrap things up. But I've been getting so many questions about this curriculum because people know that I've been using it. And so I thought I would just try to pop on real quick, in the middle of our nap time today, just to chat about it and show you guys what it's like. So if you can see me and hear me, would you just chime in? Let me know, where you're joining me from. And if you have any questions about this book, about this curriculum, please let me know. I did collect some questions earlier, so I'll be going through those and I'm going to give you a look inside and see how it looks. So I'm excited to be able to talk with you about it today. All right, so before I get too far into how the curriculum looks, I think it's important to keep in mind how our homeschool works, because everybody's homeschool works a little bit differently. And so I want you to get just a quick picture. I know I've talked about it before, about how our homeschool functions and how I homeschool as a teacher. So in our, hi Colleen, hi Desiree, thanks for joining me. In our homeschool, the way we do things is we do sort of family style, one room schoolhouse teaching method for certain subjects, things like Bible, history, and science in particular, and then some other subjects as well. And so what that looks like in our day is that in the morning, the kids come down and we have breakfast, and while they're eating, while they're strapped in or otherwise occupied, I start the lessons and we do our morning time where we do memory work and we do our Bible studies and we do our catechism and things like that. We recite the scripture we're learning. And then we dig into maybe some more Bible notebooking. So that's our morning. And that's about as much as we can handle right now, especially with a toddler at the table who usually starts banging on things right about then. And then at lunchtime, between breakfast and lunch, they're doing their independent work and their one-on-one work and everything. But at lunchtime, again, they're strapped in or otherwise occupied and quiet. That's when I do either science or history. And we just alternate weeks, or even sometimes it's a little bit more loose than that. We just alternate units. And so during that time, I'll read to them from whatever text we're using for science, and then we will kind of push the plates aside and they'll do whatever coloring and workbooks and everything. And then after lunch, when we clean up, the older kids will start the rest of their independent studies by doing whatever notebooking or workbooks or whatever was from that science or history reading. So that's kind of how we do science and history in the lunchtime. And that will be important to kind of keep in mind later when I show you how we're using this curriculum. So let me show you what I have here. We are using both the regular and the beginner version of this. So we have, here's God's Design for Life for beginners. Can you guys let me know if the text is showing correctly? If it's not, I'll try to fix that because I want you to be able to see some things. And then we have the, I should have brought myself more table space in here to spread out. Then we have the God's Design for Life book here. And you know what? I think I may have left. No, I got it. Sorry. There's so many books in here. Okay, so the way this is set up, so the regular book, God's Design for Life, is probably, I'd say 3rd to 6th grade. That's just by my estimation. I'm not sure exactly what it even says on their website, but that's what I would estimate it at, is 3rd to 6th grade. So the way it comes is, this is the teaching text. Oh, it's backwards, somebody said. Let me try. Let's see. I don't know if that works. Somebody tell me. I'm experimenting with this video apparently. Anyway, so this is the teaching text for God's Design for Life. and this is the one I'm using with the older kids. Then they have this workbook. They call it the teacher guide, but it's basically, oh good, I'm glad that worked. They basically have this teacher guide, which is the workbooks, and I'll show you the inside of this. And then for the younger kids, the beginner series, it's the same curriculum, but the beginner version, they have one book that combines the text and the workbook. And that will become more clear when I show you. So what I'm going to do is explain to you how the God's Design for Life beginners works. And then I'll explain to you how the regular one works. And then I'll explain how we fit those together. Okay. And I wanted to mention that this curriculum, the God's Design for Life, is a AIG curriculum, Answers in Genesis curriculum that has been, this is the Master Books edition. So Master Books has the exclusive rights to be able to take that curriculum and reformat it and put it into the, format that we love, that reduces the friction points and all of those things that, that we can really enjoy. Just it's easier to use, basically, in my opinion. So both of these sets come with 3 main units in each book. So this God's Design for Life comes with plants for beginners, the human body for beginners, animals for beginners. There's the same general units in the regular one, world of plants, human body, world of animals. Okay, and these do correspond, and I'll show you exactly how they do. So our homeschool has an upcoming 6th grader all the way down to a toddler. We have 6 kids. So right now, God's Design for Life beginners, I got 2 books for this. I should say I got 2 copies. I got one for my daughter who is doing this for 1st grade, and she's transitioning to 2nd grade now. And then one for my 5-year-old who's now 6. And then I did not buy one for my 4-year-old because I really didn't think that he needed it or that he was ready for that. But then he loved it so much and wanted to get involved, after the readings, that what I did was I photocopy certain pieces for him that are that he can do, like the coloring pages and tracing and things like that. So you can photocopy it. There's a little copyright information in the middle. So as long as it's within your household, you can photocopy these pieces. Personally, I try to buy, except for the case of my 4-year-old, where he's not going to use the majority of the book. He's really just going to use a couple pages, every once in a while. I tend to buy a book for each kid if it's a workbook style thing, just because my time is limited and I consider it valuable. And so for me, it makes more sense to just buy the books and use them with my kids. But you can photocopy them. They also have digital versions. So if you're, if you have a large family and you want to do this with all your kids, you could get the digital version and just read from that and print off what you need for your kids. So those are options. All right. So let's make sure I covered what I wanted to before we got in here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys inside. And the questions I got, which I will cover, the questions I have so far is, how parent intensive is it? Is it a lot of prep work? Is there a lot of supplies to gather? A lot of experiments and messes to deal with? Is it heavy on rote memorization? Would or could it work for a child who has trouble with handwriting? One question I see a lot is combining. How and what do you do? So I will talk about all of those things, how I combine it, how I adjust it for all my kids, because they're all different. They're all at different levels and they all have different, needs. And so we definitely adapt everything for our purposes. All right, so let me show you inside. Okay, so this, like I said, this is the God's Design for Life for beginners. This is supposed to be like a kindergarten through 2nd grade, I believe. And right now I have a, I guess, I don't know, grades are always hard with, homeschoolers, and we tend to school year round. And so we never just do one curriculum for, a year. So right now we're like in the middle of this, and our year's going to be ending soon, but we'll just continue to the next thing. So anyway, the ones that I have using this right now are 4, 6, and 8. Okay. And so my 6 and my 8-year-old each have a copy, and then my 4-year-old, I print off certain pieces. So some things that I love about this book is that it's beautiful. It has gorgeous color pictures that I'm going to show you. And it has a lot of helps for teachers at the beginning. And I'll just show those to you for now. So here is the supply list. So you have, it goes through each unit. So here's the plans for beginners. So it shows you for each unit what supplies you'll need. Almost all of these supplies are things that you would have around the house, which I really appreciate. There's only a few things, you know, later, like modeling clay, you know, things you want to go find or buy. And then, like all master books, they have these schedules laid out for you. So, you know, it goes through each week of the curriculum and what you can do for each day. And you guys know, if you've watched any of my videos, I completely ignore checklists. So, but I know a lot of you love the checklist. So, oh, somebody said the regular version is 3rd through 8th. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so anyway, those checklists are in there. So basically you'll see, it tells you what to read. It will tell them which lessons to do and what pages. It will have, let's see, here's the reviews. It builds in reviews, which is really nice. It goes through all the semesters, both semesters, all of the weeks. Okay, so here's the beginning of Unit 1. And like I said, there's the 3 units. So here's the Introduction to Life Science. And this is what the inside of Lesson 1 looks like for, this one was my, this is my 8-year-old. So we read the text together, and then down here it has some discussion questions. So we just talk about it together at the table. I have my younger kids answer, since this is aimed toward them. And I make sure my youngest kid, I always give my youngest kid a chance to answer first. And then I kind of go around the table until we get to the older ones. So it has some basic copy work, and then it has scripture, memorization things. You could use it for memory work. We don't use it for that. And what I do is, you know, if your kids, my kids have other handwriting curriculum, but if you are, if you have a kid who either is using another handwriting curriculum, or just, you don't want to burden them with too much copy work or whatever it might be, the nice thing is it's traced. And so I just had her do the first line. And so for my 6-year-old, I just had him pick like 1 or 2 words from the scripture. We all read it together, and he'd pick 1 or 2 words, and I'd have him trace those. So that's how we do the copy work, or the tracing. And then these little notes that you'll see throughout the curriculum are activities. And most of them are pretty simple. The ones that were more complicated, we usually set aside for another time, and we might come back to them. Or I would adapt it as I was reading it and say, you know, what if you went outside and you did this and this and this? Wouldn't that be so interesting? Because I'm sneaky like that. So this one was outdoor scavenger hunt. Go outside and collect lots of things, some that are alive and some that are not, then fill in the chart below. So we all went and did that as a family. After the reading, we went out and did that, and then the little ones came in and filled out their charts, and I would help them where needed. Here was a coloring page. So a lot of them have, they're not always just coloring pages. Sometimes they're little activities. And I'm not really sure why my daughter was scribbling on these. She loves to color, but these first few ones, she just totally scribbled in there, but that's okay. This one is a scavenger hunt. So, you know, you just did a scavenger hunt in your backyard, and then you have them, says closely look at the picture. Some of these things are alive, others aren't. Circle everything in the picture that's alive. And so they would do that. And so here's lesson 2. I'll just show you this real quick. And I love the pictures. They're just really well done pictures. And that's important to kids, you know. So here's a little worksheet. Color the plants green, color the animals orange. Matching days of the week of creation to what was created, with some discussion questions you can do with your family. Here's lesson 3. It goes through classification. You talk about it together. They trace that word and you talk about what the word means. So it's the vocabulary. It has these, you know, so this is not, I would say that this could be used from anywhere from kindergarten to 4th grade, depending on how you use it, because it's really, it can be used really simply like we're using it for my young kids, where we're just reading it with them, we're discussing it, we're enjoying it, we're doing the things that we can and have time for and, you know, inclination for, and we're skipping the things we don't. You know, we'd read through this chart, but I'm not going to study it real close with my younger kids, but we read through it and they're, you know, they get familiar with it. But your older kids, like if you were doing this with a 2nd, 3rd, 4th grader, whatever, you could take this as a launching point and, you know, you talk through this as a family and then take this, how do scientists classify living things, and go research that with your child, or have them go research it on their own and maybe narrate back to you what they learned or write up what they learned. So there's lots of ways to be able to use it and extend it if you want to use it for older kids. Here's this Who Am I worksheet. You're supposed to draw circles around trees, draw triangles around flowers, draw squares around animals, put an X on animals with feathers. So my kids love it and they learn, you know, and if they make mistakes, we talk about it. And then the last one was scripture trace. Let's see, make sure you can all see this. So I gave her the first line again. We talked through the questions, and this goes through classifying things in your closet, which we didn't do because their closet is a mess. We could probably use some classifications, but we didn't do that, but we talked through it. And I felt good about that. So that's basically what the lessons look like. And I believe it's 3 days a week that they say that you can do the lessons. And that's what the schedule shows, is 3 days a week, right? So here's, well, I guess it's 3 to 4. 3 to 4 days a week. We don't use it like that. I'll explain it to you in a little bit, how we use it. But we go through those lessons together and we really do enjoy it. So I was going to show you, here's like the flowers and fruits unit. So they have things like vocabulary crosswords with little assists in them for the younger kids. Again, beautiful pictures that are really engaging and my kids really like them. So let's see, I believe there was one more. So like here's a flower maze. My kids love that kind of stuff. They just really love them. So they find it really engaging and really good for where they are at their level. Here's the third unit. This is one of the lessons from it, water mammals. So it has the text and the tracing vocabulary and the discussion. Here's the activity, which is holding your breath. Here's color by number. So you see, that's the basic format of the lessons. Okay, in the back, you have an answer key. You probably won't need to use that much. I don't use it much, but it's there if you need it. So that's basically what this curriculum is. So you would buy one book for the God's Design for Life beginners. Okay, we have 2 kids that are using the workbook, so we bought 2. But all the text for reading and all the workbook pages and everything are in this one text. I'm going to check really quick and see if you guys had any questions about this, because I was too busy yakking, not paying attention to the questions. Okay. Well, Facebook is being super awesome and not showing me the questions. Let's see. Oh, there we are. Yeah. Okay. Somebody says, life for beginners has been great with my developmentally delayed 8-year-old. That's awesome. So anyway, this is how we use God's Design for Life for beginners. That's for my younger kids. For my older kids, we have the God's Design for Life. It's the same curriculum, 3rd through 8th grade. Okay, so here's the text that I read to them. I'll show you what it looks like. Inside, it has the same kind of schedule, or I believe that's in the workbooks thing. Okay, so here's the text. So here's Unit 1, Introduction to Science. And you kind of remember what I showed you with God's Design for Life for beginners. You can see here, there's a lot more text to look at, a lot more text to read with your children. There are pictures in there, but they're not as big. So it's definitely a higher level. And you have the vocabulary words over here and challenge words. You read through this and it has the vocabulary words highlighted. Over here, it will say, what did we learn? So it's basically discussion questions. It will ask questions and you'll talk about it or have them narrate back to you what they learned. Then they have a taking it further. So for like older kids, or if you want to challenge your children, you could talk through those discussion questions that are a little bit more difficult. So then you have the activities in here look like these. They're blue and they have the little flask, whatever it's called. Use a copy of the Is It Alive scavenger hunt worksheet to determine what whether items inside and outside of your home are alive or not. So it sounds very similar, right, to what the younger version had, and that is in the workbook, and I'll show you what that looks like, because it's just a more detailed version of what the beginners did. And then this is a piece I really like. So it takes that basic lesson, and then it has these sort of light greenish blue shaded boxes, and it has these launching pads. I don't know what you call them exactly, but that's how I think of them. It's an extra piece of information that kind of expands on and goes more in depth on whatever you learned. And so this one goes into the law of biogenesis. And so what we do is we read this together as a family, and then I have my kids answer the questions about it in their workbooks, which I'll show you in a minute. And sometimes they'll get really interested in these things, and they'll become rabbit trails for us, and we'll spend, an afternoon going and exploring and learning more about that thing. And that is beautiful to me. That's like what homeschooling should be like. So I love those pieces. I don't use those for all my kids. I just use them for my older two. So let me show you one more so you can kind of get a feel. So here's the second lesson. What is a kingdom? Here's the words to know and challenge words, the vocabulary. Here's the text that you're reading with them. Here's a fun random little fact. Here is an activity that has clue cards that were in the workbook, which I think we've actually cut out, so I won't be able to show you those. Here's their little launching pad. I'm not sure what they call it. I should probably figure that out before I keep saying that and using the wrong terminology, but they call it a challenge section. So this part of the lesson will challenge you to do more advanced activities and learn additional interesting information. So that is for your older kids, or if you just want to go deeper, or you could use it as an entirely separate lesson during your week. Okay, so that's the text that I'm reading to them and we're using for discussion. And then this is, like I said, I call it the workbook, but it's the teacher guide. It includes the student worksheets. So my son will go into this one. I want to show you in the beginning, there's a few things that I think are interesting about this. So a couple of you had mentioned to me that you're not science people, or maybe you wanted a curriculum that was easy to use and really helped you as a teacher if you're not really a science kind of person. And I just thought it was really cool that they put information in here about how to teach science. It's just information for the parent. So if you feel like you're a little bit lost, or you just need a boost in confidence, or some very, very basic information about how to get started teaching science, they give you that information. I just thought that was pretty neat. They even give you for the separate levels. And then this is the part, how do I teach creation versus evolution? I know that there are a lot of, new Christians who are homeschooling. When we first started homeschooling, I was a relatively new Christian. And so having that information, it's just like this, cheat sheet almost of these are the kinds of things you're going to encounter. This is how you can root your science lessons on God's word. And I just think that's wonderful that kind of information is included. So anyway, that's the beginning information of these. Here again are those suggested daily schedule that Tana ignores, that checklist loving homeschooling mamas just adore. So you can have all those. It has quizzes. This particular version has quizzes and tests in there as well, and it has review. So here's what the workbook looks like for this. It's less colorful, less interactive. It's more for older kids. So I read them from that text. When I'm done reading that text, my older kids have the text as a reference so they can help themselves answer these questions. Some of them we do orally. Most of them they write the answer in. Some of them it actually says explain it, read about the law of biogenesis, explain it to your teacher. So it builds in some narration pieces, which I appreciate because that's narration is a tool we find really valuable. It's Charlotte Mason kind of a flavor, so I really appreciate that. Here was that scavenger hunt worksheet. So you remember the one I showed you for beginners. This one is more complex, more involved, but we're doing the same exact activity together as a family. It's just the output that they do is different. So that's basically what that looks like. Oh, this is my daughter's. We didn't cut hers out because we did it as a group activity. So here's the clue cards that you would take out and sort for the classification activity. So that is basically what that looks like. I have a flag in here. remember what I was going to show you with this. Okay, so here's how we use this together. Oh, Amy says she loves checklists. We can still be friends. Most homeschool moms I know love checklists. I don't know what my problem is. I just have an aversion to checklists. Except for our loop scheduling checklist. That's the only one that serves me well. But so here's the thing. When you're using both of these pieces together, it can be a little confusing because, you know, am I going to try to take the checklist from this one and try to make it work with the checklist from this one, and how well do they correspond? And so they provide on Masterbook's website, I think I can leave you a link to this after we're done. The Masterbook's website, they give you an alternate schedule. So when I got this curriculum, I found these resources on their site. I think I asked in the Moms of Masterbook's group, you know, how do you guys use this together? So we use these, we printed these out to use, and this one, the beginning one, is the older kids one, and then I've even put little flaggies on here for myself at the beginning. This is the alternate schedule for the beginner's book. There's a supply at a glance printout sheet, so you don't have to dig through the book looking for the supplies. Everything is printed out nicely. And here's actually the activities for all the beginners. So I, like a good homeschooler, printed all of these out, and then I completely ignored it. I haven't looked at it since I did this months ago. And here's why. So Masterbooks is really good at making things easier. It's really good at pulling together these, you know, complex courses and everything and laying them out really nice in a way that kids really enjoy, in a way that's easier for teachers to implement. But for people like me who aren't checklist oriented, that didn't work. That wasn't working for me. And so what I realized is I spent some time just comparing these two schedules. I compared the, here's the God's Design for Life, the regular one, the schedule, and then the alternate schedule here, which is basically so they would only put the lessons in that correspond to these lessons. But I didn't want to sit there and have to look at this the whole time and figure out what I was supposed to be doing that day. So this is what we do. What I noticed was that when I compare the weeks, if I just look at each week, the topics align completely. So for both books, week 1 is about basic introduction to life science and what is a kingdom and all of that kind of stuff. Week 2 is all about plant and animal cells. The units correspond exactly. So not, you know, being somebody who wants to cover everything well with my kids, and since we're doing this as a one-room schoolhouse kind of a thing, but I don't want to have to sit there and deal with this checklist thing all day. All I do is, like I said, during lunchtime, I read to my kids from either science or history. So on science weeks, what I do is I start during lunch, I start by reading out of this book. So I open up the God's Design for Life Beginners, which is for my younger kids. And, you know, maybe I open, here's unit 2, and I start reading to them, and I show them the pictures just like I'm doing for you. I read to them. They kind of get an idea, my younger kids, for what they're going to see. For my older kids, this is really light, but it's okay. They're getting sort of like, you know, the foundation of what they're going to be going in more depth. So we just read it all together while they're eating, and I show them what they're going to be doing, and we discuss, and we go through one whole lesson of this in one sitting as we're reading, because they're fairly short. And then after I'm done reading that, I pick up the God's Design for Life, the regular version, and I open it up to that same unit. I don't remember what unit I was on in the last one here, but I open it up to the same unit, and I show it to them, and I start reading it. And I just start showing it to them. So the little kids aren't bothered by that. They are just getting more detail on what they just learned, the basics of what they learned. So I'm reading to them. We don't always get through the whole thing. I think it probably takes about, in one sitting, I think it probably takes us about 1 to 2 days of those kind of reading sessions to get through all of it, which is completely sufficient. And then after we're done, we clean up from breakfast. I give all the kids their book for, doing their activities. And my younger ones will sit down with their beginner books, and they will do their tracing, and they will do their activity. If we do it all together, they'll do their coloring page. My older kids will pick up their big book, their big workbook here, and they'll do the questions. We'll be all sitting at the table still, so we'll be talking through them together. We'll just be learning together. So the way we handle that is basically we read through the beginning stuff, then we read through the regular stuff, and then we all do the lessons together. I hope that makes sense. So instead of worrying about exactly what day corresponds to what lesson in each book, we just get through a unit together during a week. I shouldn't say not like one of these units. Those don't take a week. We get through a whole lesson a week, and sometimes two. I mean, sometimes the kids get so into it that we go into the next lesson and we do that together. As far as the experiments and the activities, most of the experiments are pretty basic. So like I showed you the one where it's just like a scavenger hunt. We're just going outside and doing stuff. We could do that in the afternoon. Sometimes we'll do that right after breakfast, right after we're reading, and then we'll come back and do our workbooks. But sometimes we'll just set it aside and do it later. So they have those sheets where you can plan ahead and figure out what materials and supplies to buy and everything. I don't even do that. A lot of homeschool moms really love that. I just don't worry about that. When I get to a lesson where there's an experiment that is saying, go do this experiment, get these supplies, and if I don't have a couple of those supplies, or I'm not quite ready to commit the time and energy to that particular experiment, there's two things I do. One of two things I do. The first one is if it's an experiment that I've decided I'm not going to do with my kids at all, then I go to YouTube and I look up that experiment and I see if it's online, like some video about that topic or some video of somebody doing that experiment. And I preview them all, of course, and if there's one, I use that. If it's one I want to do, but I'm just not ready to do right that second, I just make a mental note. I put a note on my phone saying, get these supplies. I get the supplies, and like 2 or 3 days later, or even a week later, we just do that experiment. I don't stress out about looking too far ahead. I just do what seems best for my family at the time. And so in that way, I sort of wing it a little bit more. And it works really well for us. So that is how we use both curriculums together. Since the units correspond exactly, I don't pay any attention, like I said, to what each day and lesson correspondence is. But if you wanted to, they do have a alternate schedule where you can correspond all of the lessons together. So there's a couple times though, if you do that, there's a couple issues with that to be aware of. The first one is there are more, so they don't, each lesson doesn't correspond exactly. So you might have a lesson like the one I just showed you where you're talking about classification and you're both going outside and classifying things in your backyard or whatever, doing a scavenger hunt. But other lessons might not quite be the same. Like your older kids might be learning about trees, just, more about trees, while your younger kids' unit or lesson has more to do with leaves, for example. So, but they correspond enough to where you should be able to easily do that together. Sometimes when you look at this schedule for the big kids, you see all 4 of the days are filled out. But if you look at the alternate schedule for the beginners, here, like here's an example on week 2, day 7 is blank. So they just don't have anything that specifically corresponds with that. So your kids could just not do an extra activity during that time. You can do whatever you want. But the way we do it kind of handles that problem automatically. Instead of paying attention to the schedule, our goal is to get through the, not even just to get through, but to enjoy the reading and the material and the activities and the discussion together from both books. And then each of my kids goes off afterwards to do their, level appropriate extra work. That's like the workbooks and the, fun little sheets and answering questions and narration and things like that. That works really well for me. And your older kids, I have an upcoming 6th grader. So in this coming year, what we're going to do with this curriculum, because, you know, like I said, we still have a ways to go with this one. So what we're going to do is those green boxes I showed you with the extra extension lessons, like the one I showed you. Let me just show you again in case you don't know what I'm talking about, since I'm kind of fumbling over that. Like here's one about amazing algae, where it's just, it goes into more depth or explores a related topic about whatever you're learning about. So I read through those with my kids, but then my older kids can go and read through this again themselves. And then sometimes it has experiments down at the bottom that they can do, or extra activities, or we might go check out books at the library related to that topic, and they will read up on them and maybe do a written or an oral report. So I'm going to be adding that piece for my 6th grader in this coming year to kind of extend it. It just kind of depends on your kid and what your goals are. But I think this is a fantastic curriculum for really, definitely for doing multi-level teaching. You can adapt it to the way you want. So if you're a checklist gal, use their awesome checklist, use their alternate checklist to, you know, make them combine well, the 2 different levels. If you're not a checklist kind of person, or if that's at all overwhelming to you, you don't have to do that either. You can just read through the beginning stuff, read through the regular stuff, and then have your kids do you could do the activities together, any activities that you want to do together, because there's no reason to make things more complicated and do those separately. But then their individual work that's in the workbooks, they can do on their own, all around the table, helping each other out and learning together. And then your older kids can extend that even further by doing written or oral reports or doing research projects based on those extra pieces. So there's lots of flexibility to this. We got a lot of workbooks that we got for myself. And like I said toward the beginning, you know, that might seem like a lot of books, and you don't need to do that. You can, and I prefer doing that. I prefer getting a book for every kid. I like them to have it. I don't really want to be printing out a whole bunch. I'm printing out a couple pages here and there for my 4-year-old who wants to color and participate in the, you know, table time kind of thing with all the other kids. But I like to just have that. The convenience of that is worth the money to me, and it's still really affordable, I think, for a curriculum like this. But if you need to cut back, if you're trying to really save money and your things are tight, then I would suggest a couple different ways. I wrote these down because I knew this would be a question, especially when I showed you all those books. Okay, so for the beginners, if you're just doing beginners, you could just get one of these beginner books here. You could just get one of these beginner books. So this, like I said, the beginner books includes the text and the workbook pieces all together in one. You could just get one of these if you were doing it with multiple kids and print out the pieces that all of your kids want to do. Like you can photocopy certain things out of here. That's totally legit according to the copyright on the inside cover. So you could photocopy, or you could get the digital version and copy off whatever you want, okay? The other reason I want to mention that maybe getting more than one book is nice, or at least getting the print version is nice, is that these books are so beautiful and engaging, and my kids enjoy them so much that I've caught them reading them just on their own for pleasure. And so that to me is gold, and I don't want to, I don't want to miss that opportunity. So I try to have the physical books of these on hand. All right, so you could do that. For the young kids, like I said, you could get that one book. You could just read it aloud to them. If you wanted to do it for like preschool or kindergarten and they're really not ready for any of the writing, just skip the writing. You don't need to do any of the tracing or writing. You could just do the coloring and anything that looks interesting to them and use it as a read aloud, and it will still be a great curriculum. For older kids, you could get this text, one book, or you could get the print book, and you could just do your own questions and answers, your own discussion questions. You could do your own notebooking things, get some basic notebooking paper and have them write about something that they learned, or, narrate back to you orally what they learned. You could do it that way if you didn't want to use the workbooks for written things or for the little projects. I feel like there's a lot of times where we simplify things and we just do notebooking, but I actually really enjoy the way Masterbooks did this for my kids, for my she's 4th grade and upcoming 6th grader. So it has some basic questions. It has some, discussion questions. It has things that they can write more on, but it also has those, like I showed you, the cards that they could cut out and do. Those are the things that they really enjoy the most. So I felt like it was worth it to get those books just for those kind of activities that are more hands-on, instead of just relying on the narration and like oral reports and the written pieces. So, but that is an option that you could do. Let's see. Okay, so the other question is, what if you didn't want to buy both levels, but you want to do multi-level teaching? Which one would you pick? And that's a great question. I think it kind of depends. This book here, the beginner's book, I showed you what those first few lessons are. They're pretty basic, for an older kid. They're just right for the level that they are. But if I were to use this book for my kids ages preschool up through 6th grade, this is how I would do it. I would read this aloud to them. My younger kids would actually do these kind of activities. And then I would pull pieces out of the lesson that my older kids could explore more. I would help them do internet research, or we'd go to the library and research it. We would, look up things online to help us find out more about like how scientists classify living things. This is an easy one. We could go research that, and they could do some simple notebooking and draw some pictures and, videotape themselves doing a report about it. There's lots of ways that you can extend. So if you're the kind of person who likes to start with something basic and then give your older kids extension activities based off of that, like a launching pad, then I would choose the beginner's book if you were going to do that. I think that's actually easier than if you were to try to use this book for all those kids. The reason is because the text, like right now, like I said, we read the beginner's text together, and it gives you that basic information. And then by the time we get to, this text, which is more complex, my younger kids, they're actually tuning in a little bit better. Whereas they might have tuned out a little bit if we just launched right into this, because they don't really know what I'm talking about as much. They're not completely tracking, but they tend to pull more out of this text because we just read the beginner's text, and this basically elaborates on it. So if you were going to try to use the regular book for a multi-level from like preschool on up to like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, then what I would do is I would read this, go through, let's see, I'm at the end of a lesson here. I would read this. So here's like the plant and animal cells one that we really enjoyed. I would go ahead and read through this, show these to your kids, have the olders, do the workbook, do the activities together, like the making a model of a cell. All my kids did this, not just my older kids. And this was really fun for all of us. It was like taking gelatin, like clear gelatin, and using food pieces like fruit and stuff to make little Ziploc bags that look like either plant cells or animal cells. They all really enjoyed that activity, and they learned a lot from them. So you can do all of that together no matter what your level. But then as far as my little kids, the piece that I feel like would be missing is that the activity with their hands, the table time activity. They really do enjoy that. So the younger books have that with like the mazes and the activities and the tracing and all that stuff. But the piece that I always try to have in our homeschool is coloring. So if I can just have some coloring sheets related to, I could go find some coloring sheets or whatever on Pinterest that are related to the cells, maybe find some simplified version of this and give that to my younger kids and talk through it with them maybe. That would be the way that I would try to take this and simplify it and make it more hands-on and usable for my younger kids. But you can definitely do that too. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Let me see if there were any other questions about that. Okay. All right. Okay, yes. So what I was saying was that if I were to pick one or the other for multi-level teaching, I would probably pick the beginner's one and extend it on my own with additional activities. That would be my choice. it's a little bit more difficult for me. Everybody's a little different, so it just depends on what works best for you. If you're the kind of person who it's easier for you to take basic lessons and extend them for your kids, or to take more, full, robust, more advanced lessons and find simplified, activities or talking points or whatever for your younger kids. You can easily do both. You just got to figure out which one you prefer. I tend to prefer starting with something basic and extending it, at least when it comes to things like this, like history and science. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Before you sign off, I want to remind you that if you order anything from Master Books, you can use the coupon code TAUNASFRIEND, TAUNAS, friend, to get 5% off your order as long as it hasn't been used before. It's a one-time code. So you can use that if you want. We really like this curriculum. I think it works really well for multi-level teaching. I hope the way I've explained that you can use the checklist if you're a checklist mama, or no checklist if you don't like those checklists. Whatever, it's very, very flexible to work with your family and your needs and your teaching style. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me.